You are listening to Faith in the Firehouse. This is a podcast by firefighters talking about Jesus, the fire service, and life around the firehouse, taking a look at things through the lens of the gospel. We are not pastors, preachers, or Bible scholars. We're just firefighters after God's own heart, and we want to talk about it. So if you want to join in on the conversation, hit the comment section, like, subscribe, share. We appreciate it. I think there's a lot of good things to discuss from this episode, things that I've wanted to discuss for some time and want to continue to discuss to try to get to the bottom of it. Again, I don't claim to be an expert or have all the answers, but I think healthy conversation is where these things start. This is episode 29 with my newfound brother in Christ and brother in the fire service, Matt Wilson. Matt was down from Grand Rapids, Michigan, sat in on one of our Bible studies. It was a really good study that Jose led, and Matt brought a lot to it as well in the discussion, and he had mentioned to me that he was thinking about maybe starting something of his own. So I invited him out to the studio, and we had a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. We talked about everything from the struggles of the EMS system to working in a downtown area, the differences between our two departments in some areas, and the similarities that I think a lot of us deal with throughout the fire service. And we talked about the homelessness problem, and he shared with us a story of someone very close to him who overcame that problem, a success story. So we also talked about loving your neighbor. Who exactly is your neighbor, right? And we talked about learning to let go and let God. Matt broke down what he believes are 3 different types of firefighters. I thought this was really interesting. So it had me doing some self-reflection on which one I was at different parts of my career. It was a little reminder and some self-reflection for me on how to stay on track. So again, I thought this was a great conversation. I hope y'all enjoy it. Here we go.
Heavenly Father, thank you for just allowing us to come together right now and just talk about you. Pray, Holy Spirit, that you would lead us and guide us and continue to mold and shape us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, Lord, and be light in the darkness for you. We thank you. We love you. And all these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I didn't plan to leave the music running, but it was a nice little background. Nice. I like to start off with a little praise music, get to kind of get my head right, before we go into these things. And obviously we start with prayer because we want the word to be guided by the Holy Spirit. And definitely, the things we're talking about here, less of me, more of him for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you for prayer. Thank you for opening it and blessing the podcast. And man, I'm stoked that you're here, dude.
It's an honor, man.
It's pretty cool.
It's crazy. The pathway.
Yeah, man. It's a cool world we live in where we get to connect with people. And, I've had, I'd say, a bad taste in my mouth for social media for some time until I started using it right, Mm-hmm. And because of that, we were able to connect through the Instagram page. You came across our page after the fire conference, which is really cool. And the podcast, I think, is still in its infant stage, still pretty early on, but you're probably one of the first people that really had reached out to me, and it was really encouraging. So thank you. Because as much as I felt led to do this, it's also been scary. It's also taken some faith to put myself out there. So having that encouragement along the way is definitely appreciated. And you shared with me that you were thinking about maybe doing something similar.
Yeah. Also more in the development stage, I would say, but definitely am feeling called to start a little something of my own. And being up in Michigan, obviously, not being from here, but coming down and being able to be on here gives me a lot of hope and a lot of just assurance that it's just this easy in a sense to go and do, right? So yeah. Set it up and get it going. So but yeah, it's a blessing right now to be a part of this, and Um, it was also just encouraging to see that the Lord is doing something across the board when it comes to bringing His light to the fire service. And I think that is something that it should be talked about more as we're, starting to do, and praying, hoping that it becomes a real solid foundation for people that do this job. And hopefully as things progress, it just spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, I think it's no coincidence that that you're here today. Um, so we'll get into your introduction in a second, but just to build on what you said, like you're from Michigan, and I'm down here in Florida. You happen to be visiting some family who live kind of just a town away.
Mm-hmm.
Really, how long did it take you to get here?
30 minutes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like 20, 30 minutes over to Palm Bay. So that's kind of cool, man. So yeah, you had reached out and mentioned that you felt you're being called to do something in, some kind of ministry, maybe a podcast or an Instagram page or some kind of social media. And personally, I think there can't be too much of us out there doing this.
Mm-hmm.
For one reason being that we all can relate to people differently. You're going to be able to relate to people that I can't,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to be able to relate to some that you can't. And one thing I think that's really awesome about like kind of living in the kingdom world now, like being kingdom minded, is it's all about building each other up, because it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about anybody of the other guys that have been on this podcast. It's not about, we talk about names of pastors who become big names, but even most of them, or at least any of the ones we share here, hopefully it's not about them. It's about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that when you think of things in the worldly, it's some people have this attitude that like, they'll kind of keep other people down to build themselves up. Or like if they're doing a fitness podcast, they don't like, I wouldn't say this is true across the board, but that can be a mindset you get caught up in, like this competition mindset. Whereas when you're kingdom minded, it's about helping each other. Like I hope that you do have a podcast that becomes a ministry or something similar. And I have a few other people that I talk with, and I would love to help them get going. Cause the truth is I'm not going to be able to do this forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hope, for now, I know we're here today and I'll be here next week, but,
Yeah.
For now, that's my commitment, but, I might not be able to do this forever. Life, God will have other plans for us, and
Seasons.
yeah, exactly. There's different seasons, and, we help each other build that foundation, build a network of believers, especially in the fire service. I would love to be able to do something regularly with you, remotely. Obviously, it's always the best to be here, like in person, and have this connection. It's
great.
Yeah, there's definitely no substitute. But being able to connect with people over the internet, we have these tools. Like, we should use them.
Yeah, man. And you talking about the competitive mindset, I struggled with that in the academy, and not in the sense of trying to be the best, but understanding that my heart wants to just be great for the people. And in these certain situations where they're like, oh, you got to beat this time, or you got to beat this person. And yes, we should. And the thought process now, of course, in hindsight, is you're beating those times to be the best that you can be for the people. But in my mind, what I'm seeing is my partner in front of me, who I'm not trying to look good or better than them. I'm trying to just be the best that I can for the people, right? And it was hard for me to separate those and say, I'm not trying to look better than you, but I'm trying to be the best that I can be. So, not that I would pull back on things that I was doing, but it was a weird shift for me.
Yeah, it's just your motivation shift. It's not necessarily your effort, but your motivation. And that's tough for a lot of us, I think, in the fire service, because we are, competitive people. It's a physical job, mentally and physically. It takes a lot. So like, you naturally want to be the best, especially, we're going into a field where, you're going to be in dangerous situations, and, it's just our nature, really.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's unfortunate sometimes that some people do get, that motivation is just to
be better than somebody else.
Yeah. It's like, it's for themselves. And, I mean, I can't say I've always had perfect motives for sure.
No,
but
yeah.
being kingdom minded now, it's all about him. And honestly, as I got older, the motivation to do things for myself just dwindled. Like I'm like, I don't know, man. I had a fire for the fire service when I first started getting into it because I wanted to be the best and I wanted to do this and I wanted to be on special teams.
Oh yeah.
And then you attain those things, or I did, and I kind of started losing the drive, but that's probably because it was all about me,
Mm-hmm.
and now I have a drive to glorify God
Yeah.
in everything that I do.
Yep.
I don't accomplish that all the time, but I'm
No.
trying, man.
Try
And
and strive for it. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess before we get too much into it, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. Give us a little bit about your walk with Christ. I always like kind of hearing the full story, even if it's just like the cliff notes. As far as like, did you grow up a believer? Was there a period where you walked away from Christ? Was there like a surrender moment? Like, how did your walk go?
Yeah. So I grew up, like we talked about, like in Palm Bay, and I grew up in a Christian home. Was a believer pretty much since I was a kid, probably middle school age, 14 or so, and never really had a breakdown moment of needing, a huge change or having some big hardship that brought me to the faith. It was something that my parents had always talked about, went to church consistently, and I was always, of course, open to, never really understood it, but that's kind of when I attribute myself in acknowledging that I was a believer and a follower of Jesus was in middle school. Um, Parents got divorced a couple years after that, which was kind of a heavy hitter for me. And I just continued on with what I was doing. And I actually met some friends right around that same time that were all adopted out of Seattle, but they were here coming to a local church. And they were all instrument based people, like musical people. And they're like, hey, man, come jump on this drum set. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing on that drum set. But and I think that this is one of the God parts of this of him interceding and just allowing things to happen. I don't remember connecting my hands with my feet in rhythm, but as far as I can think back, I was just able to just put that together, and then it just started. And I've been playing in every church setting that I've been able to play at since around that time, and excluding basic training because in the military there are only a certain amount of things you can do, and obviously in basic you're becoming that new airman. So
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit, I had the interest as a kid in the fire service. We had a corner house that looked out to a main road. And that main road, one day I was just, playing in the house or whatever. We had a sliding glass door, and I heard a noise, didn't know what it was. And so I run to the sliding glass door, open the blinds, and it's like three fire trucks, and they're rolling by. And I'm like, Mom, what is that? She's like, oh, those are fire trucks. I'm like, man, those look really cool. And she's like, oh yeah. And this is of course when I'm, probably 6, 7 years old. And she's like, oh yeah, those are fire trucks. And she eventually ends up taking me like every weekend in Palm Bay to the fire station, and the guys like got to know me and knew who I was, and I would just like take a tour every weekend or whatever. And that progressed to me joining the Explorer program in Melbourne for 4 years, all through high school. And I was like a religious, like going every Saturday kind of kid. Oh, Matt's gonna come in, Matt's coming in, and that was great. So shout out to those two departments, just real fast. They really brought me up, and a lot of my not secular values, but I would say more or less the values that your family or like your father would give you. Melbourne, those guys at Melbourne gave me as I was coming up and learning and growing. Because my dad wasn't really in the picture. My dad was around, but he wasn't, that leadership figure, right? And those guys were that for me. So shout out to those guys.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So post high school, I was like, man, I want to do this job, and I want to do it right now. Funny story about that is I enlisted to go to the military, and I kind of didn't catch the hints that were there, because I had some people asking me, "Hey, what are you doing? You know, I know you're about to graduate. What's your plan? Blah blah." And I'm like, "I'm going to the military. I'm going to the military. I'm going to the military." Well, I did, and you know, it was either the first or second time that I was able to come back and take leave. I'm in the kitchen or whatever, and sitting around with a bunch of guys, and they're like, "Yeah, how's the military going? Good, sweet. Yeah, we were gonna pay for your fire school and then hire you after that, but you joined the military, so hopefully that's going good." I'm like, "What?"
You could have told me that.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. So I was like, "You're gonna do what?" I would have loved to work here, you know. So, but it's all to the plan, and
Yeah.
it was great. So yeah, post high school, I joined only wanting to be a firefighter. I was kind of dabbling in trying to be that special ops, like cool person or whatever, but um, wasn't wasn't for me, right? So um, I spent 6 years in Clovis, New Mexico, which is in the middle of nowhere. Had one deployment and was able to get up to staff sergeant,
Nice.
or company officer, more or less for Air Force terms.
Gotcha.
And it was fun. Great experience. Great stepping stone. Wasn't as busy because you know everything is connected to somebody when it comes to being on base. So your your dorm catches fire. What did you do to make the dorm catch fire? Typically, they're gonna have a lot of things in place to keep the government assets from being lost, of course. So
They're running a tighter ship than your average neighborhood
neighborhood block,
downtown
right?
area,
Yeah. So
yeah.
so it was slow, but there were some great people and some of my best friends that I've met, you know. So and then coming out of that, I met my wife, and we got married and had a kid soon after that, and this little Mia's 3 at the house right now, so she's running the world.
I bet.
And just taking us along the journey, but it's been a great blessing. We experienced a lot spiritually there. My wife got saved there in Clovis at a church,
Okay.
and that church actually ended up closing and kind of having a rename themselves, because the pastor ended up having some issues, and there was a big falling out, experienced some church hurt and everything like that.
Yeah, that's tough, man.
So that was a big part of it, but she did get saved there, and that was a big part of growth for me. And now I am up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Work for a great department. We have 11 stations, and we fight quite a bit of fire, and some other stuff that we do. We're pretty much have most of the capabilities that a lot of the mid-sized to larger departments have, and it's great. Been very blessed along the process, and then I have a church up there, also serving up there. So
nice. Yeah, it sounds like your department's pretty close to ours. Like we're 17 stations, and I don't know what our population is anymore, but it's we're like that mid-level city. We're not quite a big city, but we're not a small town. We got some urban areas, and I've never been to Grand Rapids, but it's kind of what I'm picturing.
yeah,
You know,
we got less trucks, but
yeah.
it's all right.
You make do with what you got, and like we have a really strong truck culture in our department in Orlando, and it's awesome to be a part of. But man, engine company ops can be just as much fun. I mean, it all depends who you ask, and you know, like I'm looking at promoting. Hopefully, you know, I'm going to really put some effort into that, and you know, I know I'll be going back to an engine, and the idea of like looking at engine stuff from a lieutenant role now is like exciting. It's almost like a new aspect of the job.
Yeah.
Like one of my career goals was to leave the fire service, like trying to sit in every seat, you know, being able to be a fireman on an engine, fireman on a truck, fireman on a rescue, engineer. I'm a floater, so I get all that. Same thing, you know, the only thing I'd like to do hazmat or something someday, but
Yeah.
that's about the only thing at this point I may not be able to cross off my list. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see if I have the the drive to do that.
Yeah.
At this point in my career.
I've kind of had the same mindset. Our department's a little bit different. You can jump around and hop around. I ideally would like to be a little bit more controlled in the progression if I can, to being on an engine for a while and then being on a truck and then maybe a rescue. And the way that we run is a little bit different, and our rescues are kind of a multifaceted, weapon, if you will. So
Right. Yeah. Your rescue is more like a
squad.
Yeah. Whereas when I say rescue for the listeners, it's an ambulance.
Yeah.
It's a transport unit.
Yeah.
It's a transport unit that runs fire as well. Whereas like we have medic units, those are paramedic only. But yeah, down here we call them rescues. So, as you go through your career, I feel like there's definitely your people who are like, they are just great at that job. Whether it's they're a ropes guy or they're just a career fireman or whatever. And then there's other people who, it's just a lot to try to be a part of everything. I feel like if you ever want to go on to like lieutenant or a chief level, having at least an understanding of what's going on, that's what'll drive me to go to hazmat school.
Mm-hmm.
Because early on in my career, it became kind of obvious that like in our department, there's two different tracks basically for special teams. It's like you're a hazmat guy or you're a TRT guy. And there's good reason for that, because like I said, it's hard. Like hazmat, I feel like is just this big world of stuff. These guys, they're smart.
Yeah.
And the TRT stuff, you got to be smart too, but it's a lot to try to be good at all of it.
It's hard to do. It takes time, and I'm a firm believer that you're only going to be so good at so many things that you do at one time,
Yeah.
And if you're doing two things, you can definitely be way better than you're doing five.
Yeah, and that becomes really apparent as you like, for me especially, because I'm a creature of habit. It's just why like floating I'm learning, but it's not good, man. Like I like my routine, and if I'm on a rescue all the time, then I've got my my routine with the rescue. If I'm on an engine all the time, I got my routine with that engine. The same thing with a truck. And then you go from like when I made it to a truck, I always said I would not be one of those like paramedics who forgot about my medic skills, but it's almost like they swap those skills out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But it's because it's hard to stay up on everything.
And we're non-transport BLS up there.
Yeah.
So trying to be a paramedic in your head.
Yeah.
And then going, okay, here you go.
Yeah. There's a lot that we do that you got to stay on top of everything, man.
Yeah.
You definitely can't get complacent. I used to joke that like the way we carry our tools, and I don't know if other departments do this, but we carry a hook and a Halligan together, like married.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys will put like a chain link on them,
yep,
or it'll be grooved out or whatever. But they didn't all used to be like that. So it was like, it kind of took some skill to marry them properly. And so they didn't flop all over the place. And it was like, as soon as I got assigned to a truck, they seemed to go well together. It's like, I got that skill, but then I forgot how to do IVs.
Yeah. That's a good trade-off.
Yeah.
You're not missing nothing.
Yeah. So you said you had some friends that were adopted out of Seattle.
Yeah.
Your friends were adopted. Not you.
Not me.
Okay.
No.
I just you kind of went over that and I was like, I didn't know if I heard that right.
Mm-hmm.
You covered most of this, but so you said you didn't have like a rock bottom moment or like any like wayward years, but was there a moment where things really changed for you when you really went from, like for me, I call it my surrender moment, where I planted my flag and I was like, I'm going all in, no more like half in the world, half out, which was a stark contrast for me because, like I said, I kind of was in and out, never fully in, and I didn't know what that looked like.
Yeah.
So for me, there was a moment where like I planted my flag and I was like, I'm following whatever this book says, and I'm following Jesus. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment like that for you?
Yeah. So in New Mexico, prior to meeting my wife, I was with somebody else, and it was a relationship that probably didn't need to be, if you will. More in the sense of like we should have been friends due to the fact that I was younger mentally and trying to figure things out, but trying to be a fixer. And she had a lot of hurt from her passed and her family. And I was trying to be the fixer of everything at that time when I didn't really realize that probably she just needed somebody to be there for her. And it resulted in a lot of boil over with frustration and me just focusing all of my attention on that to try and fix it,
Yeah.
and maintain and sustain that relationship, right? So however long that went through, I can't remember now, but eventually it came a point where we knew that we were done and that was it, right? And I'm emotional about it. And this day I was headed to church and I was in the car. I had about a 30-minute drive, just how everything was spaced out there. About a 30-minute drive. And that morning, when everything was more or less done, I kind of sat back and thought to myself, I was like, well, what now? And I felt the Lord directly speak to me and say, yeah, what now? And I'm like, oh man, I had
Wow.
been completely neglecting my relationship with the Lord,
Wow.
trying to fix this relationship, and just broke down, and that point was really just a big, you know, realization of the foundation, the root is always Jesus, and allowing him to be the rock for what we do in our lives every single day. And things progressed from there, and went for the upward momentum, if you will, or took the upward swing.
Wow.
And knew my wife already, and we started hanging out at that point, and then yeah,
Wow.
snowballed in a good way.
Yeah, I feel like that's a kind of probably a common theme. I mean, it's probably a lot of men, but again, fire service and the way we are, like we want to control situations, and that was a big part of my surrender too. And I know it seems like it was the rock bottom, but what the rock bottom led me to is being in a position of being out of control, where
Mm,
I was trying to control, like from a rehab where my wife was going to be taken care of. I
yeah.
was trying to control all these things, and there was a moment there where the the counselor like basically tried to beat into my head like, this is out of your control,
Mm,
and you need to let go and let God. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, but you don't understand. Um, and that was part of that. Like, I shared some of that in the testimony that same day where all this stuff was kind of happening. But that was a big part of it, man. It's like that control is tough for us to
yeah.
let go. Did the fire service change anything about your faith? Did it make it, were there times where it was difficult to have faith? Or has it strengthened your faith at this point in your career?
Up to now.
Yeah, so you've been with Grand Rapids for how long now? And you were a firefighter in the military, so
Yeah.
what, like 6 years or something there?
six
But
years
and you've been with Grand Rapids for
2.5 years,
yeah,
roughly. So um one thing I will say about when I was in the military, and the one of the crazy stories, because there's a few of them when it comes to me and my wife coming together, is the way that things were set up there was we were on a 48-hour schedule, on and off. You had a Kelly day every once in a while, but 2 shifts, and that was it. The way that the military works with a lot of jobs, not just ours, is you have your active duty, or your active guard working with civilian contractors. So we had the same thing there, had a few civilians, and they weren't the healthiest. Not all of them, but there was a good amount that weren't the healthiest bunch to be around when it came to opinions and kind of chirping in leadership's ears about things. So me and my wife were a secret for 18 months roughly.
is she in the service too, or
Yeah,
does that
she
have to
was
do with
she
it?
was she was with me there. So
Yeah.
we deployed separately, but we still had two guys that we knew were kind of going to be not an issue, but something that we would have to deal with, right? And this is speaking of God moving mountains for you, and in the process of things. So the way that movement works with civilians is they either retire or they promote or leave, right? When it comes to in the military, because as an active duty member, you're constantly trying to promote, get the next rank, and it's kind of frowned upon to not do that. where civilians are not required to promote, and you also can't unless another position opens up ahead of you. So as we're starting to become more serious and be a thing, we're looking at the situation. We're like, this is not going to be good because we know, these individuals are going to be all over this and just making it hell for us. So fast forward a little bit, there was a chief that came from Eglin Air Force Base, which is down here, and just talked to a couple of civilians. I think he was just traveling as an IMA guy. And he kind of, put it in their ear, hey, come down there, and it's a cool spot to be. You'll be in Florida. You'll make probably more pay because I can give you a promotion or whatever. And one of the guys was like, I'd like to do that. So he leaves. And not a short time after him leaving, the other guy changes shifts. So then it's like, wow, this mountain that seems to be immovable,
yeah,
with the lack of movement that happens there, right there, boom, moves to where we, have more peace on shift, and just don't have to deal with stuff that we would have felt to be really unnecessary, because obviously we kept things very professional, and I just didn't talk to her at work. Just like, so so we had a couple people that knew about it, but we kept it under wraps, and it was amazing to see the Lord actively move for us and answer those prayers. So that was a big one that we experienced.
Yeah.
Coming forward now through, and to answer the other part of your question, I think a lot has changed. We're going to get into it. Like, I love being downtown and running on the homeless people, running on the people that, some people are like, oh man, I hate this district, or I hate going here. And these people are so, this, that, and the other. And you're like, I don't know. Those are the people that they can't, in most people that we run on aren't going to be able to give back to us. Right. We have like people bring in donuts or different gifts and stuff,
but that's where the thank you for your service comes from, the fact that we're doing things that people don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. So that's changed my perspective. There's some other things that I'm thinking about, and I'd like to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive and ask some people some questions that are newer on the job and are believers, because there is something to be said about trying to fit in as a probie, but also being a believer.
Yeah.
And trying to, play that fine line of, do I go into this conversation right now, or do I hang around? Do I do this certain act or action that, wouldn't be glorifying God,
right,
but it would allow me to fit in more and better,
Yeah, that's a huge pressure. That's a huge pressure for rookies, especially if you come into the fire service young. Like, I got hired at 21 years old on my first job. Really had no other experience. Like, and yeah, they tell you so much early on that, like, your first year, like, you earn this reputation, you're never going to be able to break it. That's not true, man.
No.
Your first year will set the grounds for you. But I know a lot of rookies who were like terrible rookies, but they're great firemen.
Yeah.
Then they became great lieutenants. You learn some lessons the hard way, but it's kind of like we tell kids, like, the best 4 years of your life is high school. Like, dude, stop telling people that.
No.
Stop telling rookie, like, and that's, again, to not to downplay, like, it's important that you come in and make a good impression. But Absolutely. If you hammer it so much that people feel like I got to go with the flow on everything, and that's a big motivator for me doing this podcast. As I shared in my testimony, like, I moved away from my faith. I moved away from my family, my church. I never had that foundation, and I didn't have a strong foundation to begin with. Like I said, I was kind of toes in, toes out, a little bit most of my young life. But that's exactly what happened. Is I got so caught up in wanting to be accepted by the people around me. And now that I have some time on the job, like, I've got some really good examples of guys who, like, did not buy into any of that at all. And I remember thinking, like, one guy in particular who, like, he's just super quiet, like, doesn't get in on the gossip, goes to bed early. Like me, I was like up, I had to be the last one going to bed or whatever, like silly things like that.
Yeah.
And so to me, those things were like counter to what a rookie should be doing, but he always took care of his job. Like, those things are really important. Like, he was always early. And to this day, this guy is like, can do no wrong.
Yeah.
but he didn't buy into having to impress everyone about everything. He just
Mhm.
did his job and stayed focused on it. Like, and that's something that Freddie Polk brought up in the very first episode, is like wearing Saul's armor, wearing someone else's like outfit. I wore that for too long, man, and it wasn't me. It didn't fit.
Mm.
And so that's what, like, again, this a motive. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a motivator. Because I want to be able to give those young guys confidence. Like, dude, stand up. That's not to say you have to be a social pariah and like separate yourself from the other guys. Like, it does take some
Finesse, if you will.
finesse, yeah, and learning when you can and cannot. There's times where, like, I don't know. I guess working with my crew enough, where I've been at lately, there's some stuff that just doesn't really come up, and then I'll float in occasion. It's like these conversations. I'm like, dude, I don't need to be a
Yeah.
part of this, and learning how to like kind of step away from the dinner table in a way that's not like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, you don't want to
Yeah.
be that guy, and because that's judgmental, even if you don't say anything, if you have that
Exactly.
attitude. So
Yeah, not coming off as judgmental,
yeah,
but not involving yourself in things where you're not, you ought not to be a
yeah.
part of, So that's the thing that I'm trying to find a balance of to myself. And um
But
everything's super easy to say.
just to finish that thought, is like, I can assure you that if you come in and you're good at your job, I don't care what you believe, all this other, like, if you're good at your job, you work hard, you're going to be respected.
Yep.
So yeah, if you want to just dive into defining faith.
Yeah, so in prayer and just a little bit of research and thinking about the things that I've experienced in my short time, and understanding the nature of the Lord, and then the opportunity that we have, I like to shed some light on faith and purpose. The dictionary definition of faith is complete trust or confidence in something or someone. Complete trust can be changed out with strong belief, right? Because we do know that nobody makes decisions on 100% certainty ever, right?
Yeah.
These are most of the time subconscious decisions in the experience and environments that we're around, right? Because at that point, we've had enough experience to then make a decision, but sometimes we consciously make decisions that go against those things because we have a certain faith or belief in something, right? And so the biblical definition is Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. So the things that we hope for, but we haven't seen the results of those things yet, right? And not tying it directly to the fire service just yet, but in those decisions that we're making, like flying on planes, we don't know
Yeah.
the equipment that went into putting that plane together unless you're, a plane mechanic or a pilot, right? You don't know what goes into that stuff. You sometimes don't even hear the pilot themselves until you're on your descent into the destination of where you're going, right?
Right.
The
You
flight
don't you don't
crew.
know him personally. You don't know. You're trusting
Yeah.
you're trusting all these things. Like, when you peel back all these little layers, like, I don't think people realize how much they are putting faith into
And
these
things.
things.
The flight crew also,
Yeah.
the training, all these things that people are doing, the luggage crew, the people that are going to put these, these suitcases and bags in certain places so they don't slide or shift in flight to where they affect your plane's movement. You're trusting a lot of these things, and I'd like to make the argument that you have a lot more faith than you may think that you do.
Yeah.
Driving's the same thing, right? So then that multiplies times however much in the event or the possibility of you getting injured or losing your life, right? But people take the risk because it's more worth walking for an hour and a half. But also you have belief and trust in yourself and faith that you will get there safely, right?
Yeah. You have faith in, so that's the thing, is like, you have faith in like the idea of the mechanic, or the idea of the pilot, the idea of the paramedic that shows up. But if you knew each one of us personally, we're just people,
Yeah.
none of
Yeah.
us are perfect.
No. And there is training, and there's certain things, right, that
Yeah.
people will say. At the end of the day, you're still believing in something, and
Yeah.
that faith that you have also should be attached to a purpose, right? Because you can have faith in that pilot or, you know, yourself to drive to a certain destination. But to go a little bit further than that, and as I was doing research, and I had, done research on this before, but getting into more of the stuff of what faith is and what belief is prior to now, I thought to myself, well, what's the point of having faith in these things if you still don't believe in anything, overall? It becomes kind of arbitrary to have faith in certain things if you don't have a purpose to those things that you believe in, right?
Yeah.
And really what I want to get to about all this is that the fire service is faith-based by nature. And my, example of that is even the crews that you work with every day, you're experiencing new incidents in new places with them.
Yeah.
To where you trust them more than you would trust a traveler coming in or somebody floating like yourself, right? Mm-hmm. But you still have to have that faith in them that in those new incidents, you're going to have them right behind you, making good decisions with you and right there if something goes south, right? And the faith grows as we continue on, right, in our careers. And, faith in people can be less than some others, right? With the different people that have different habits that we don't agree with or their work ethic.
Right.
So he could be like, I don't know about this, but we still come in and put our gear on the truck every day, right? And we have the faith that says in ourselves that we can go into a house that we've never been in the smoke, the heat, and we're going to be able to get somebody out and save their, like, we have the audacity, right? And for good reason, because we've seen the evidence of things that we're able to do, but we still have the faith every day to know that anywhere in multiple different areas of the cities that we work in, these things can happen, and we believe that we can actually make a difference, and we know that we can, right? So it's almost like beyond a reasonable doubt, like we show up and we're gonna make a difference. That's the goal of every day, right? That's faith to me. And you see this, like I always think about this example is the crews on 9/11. So putting this in perspective, right? 110 floors up, plane crash into the building. They went up there with the 2.5-inch line, and they're like, we're gonna put this fire out. We're gonna save as many people as we can. And I know that there were some guys that were like, this is it. This is it,
Yeah.
But there's others that are like, I don't think it is. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And I also believe that they knew that there was a lot of people that they could save, and that's one of the big reasons that they still went, and they did save a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
But to go up there and say, I know, I see it, but we're gonna put it out. It'll go out eventually. That's faith more than I've seen faith in the fire service, anywhere else. So
I believe we have to operate in the miracle margin. We have to operate in that area that, like, no matter how dire the situation, we're going to give until it's 100% chance that this person's dead or this person's whatever. Like, if there's a small chance, that's where God works through us.
Yeah.
And before I had faith, I can't say that I operated in that area.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, a big thing that's changed for me. And I'm not saying I ever, called a code too soon or anything like that or whatever, but it's totally different mindset when you're like, hey, miracles can happen, and they can happen through us.
Yeah.
And we need to do our part.
Yeah.
We need to be there and put every effort forth and trust that God's going to take care of this situation.
Yeah. And the prep work, right, comes with the mindset that we do have the possibility of making a difference. Yeah. And we show up and prepare to be able to make that difference when we're called upon, right?
Yeah. I say this prayer every shift. I came up with this prayer before I would say I had the belief in the strength of faith that I do now, because I didn't really understand the supernatural, but I was praying because I thought I should or whatever. And I would pray, and I still pray this prayer every day, every shift. God, give me the strength, the wisdom, and the wit to perform to the best of my ability. And And I say to the best of my ability because I didn't expect God to perform miracles through me.
Mm.
And I keep it that way now because it's like, it's a reminder that I got to put the work in.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
faith without works is dead.
exactly. Yeah.
And so as we continue through this, as we know, that mentality of being able to make a difference can change if you don't have that solid foundation. And in my mind, right, the secular believing people, I believe, function best in this when they have good leadership above them or around them to motivate them. And then for us believers, it should be Jesus, right? And what the Bible says about how we, conduct business every day. But those things can change, right? Leadership can change, and it does change. It's only a matter of time before it does. And you're susceptible to changing your mindset based on the ones that are leading you or around you, right? And it's
really
got to
good
be
point,
solid,
man. Really good point.
And so we see this too, like your experience, a little bit of experience that I have. There's kind of three different members that we work with. The people that come in and I do what's necessary, then I go home.
Mm-hmm.
I think those individuals, they're limited by their influence of people around them and their level of comfortability. And they become liabilities themselves and then are rarely dependent upon when it comes to high acuity incidents, right? When something goes down and you look around, we see chiefs do it all the time, right? They go, rip. So we kind of can know who those people are, and they have every right to come in and do that. But should we be doing that every day? Absolutely not.
Should your goal be the minimum standard?
Never.
No. I think everyone's going to have good and bad days, but if that's your goal to come in every day, we as a group will pick up the slack. And just like you said, chief might put him somewhere else, or the rest of the crew will pick it up for him. But like somebody's doing your work.
Yeah.
And that might just be carrying the bags on the call or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next type, in my opinion, is the members that do well and they're trusted among many. Kind of like how you talked about before, just the people that are good at their job. They don't feel the need to go above and beyond. And I believe that's fine. If you're getting the job done and you're trusted and well respected, there's no reason to feel that you have to overextend yourself past doing the best that your efforts are gonna take you, right? So we should be trying to strive to be the best that we can and stretch those limits if that's where we're gonna go with it. But we know the people that are doing less than they're able to do,
Yeah.
So and hundreds of people that we work with that we know that are solid people would never have something that you would consider that they would necessarily need to do better consistently. Because I would say this is on like a consistency, like consistently.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is there's an overall like level throughout your career that you have to maintain.
Yeah.
Because some people that are hard chargers, for too hard too quick, they can burn out.
Oh yeah.
Especially when, and I'd love to, I don't know if we'll get into that burnout, but yeah, it can. I mean,
yeah, I'm about to hit on it right now.
Yeah, if you're hard charging number 3 and I'm gonna be a number 4 right out the gates, then yeah. It's because the other thing that leads to. So if you're giving 110% to the fire service, but you're neglecting your family, you're neglecting other things, those things will come back around and affect you as a fireman.
Oh yeah.
I've seen it through many people,
mm-hmm.
And so finding that balance,
yeah,
is really important. So
yeah. So then the last of this kind of general summary, if you will, of the type of people that we tend to work with in different categories is the firefighters at heart, right? So these are the blanket term. Firefighter is your squared away medic, engine rat, truckie, rescue nerd. The guys that you look at and they're like, that's it, So Um, they teach, they drive the culture to be the best version of yourself for the people when they call, right?
Hmm.
Um, the only thing is, and as I was talking to before, is that all of these types of people are susceptible to burnout, decrease in motivation, and job dissatisfaction. And I'm a firm believer of the people that do well and the firefighters at heart. If they are not faith based, then they are incident based. They have the hope in the incident that comes to where they can use their skills or their prep that they're prepping for. But
Wow.
if that doesn't come for a while,
Wow.
job dissatisfaction, right?
That's a really profound observation from a guy who, like he doesn't have 100 years on in the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wonder a lot, like, had I had faith this whole time, would I have avoided burnout? There was a point where I was burnout. Like I was really like, I don't know if I can keep going in this career. That's how
Mm-hmm.
I felt.
Yeah.
Um, my faith has rejuvenated that for me. And I always wonder, when you get to these points where you're giving everything,
Mm.
you're giving and you're in so many ways, but you're not being filled yourself,
Yeah.
and what I thought would fill me back up would be like rest. I need to take some time off or whatever, and sure, that helps. But I do feel like I get fed when I'm out of energy. Like I get filled up by the Spirit
Oh yeah.
when I pray in the morning, and especially when I'm feeling very drained. I hit my prayers harder, and I don't know if this is how it's supposed to be, but it's just, I'm like, I get in prayer more, I get more in worship,
I think it is.
and it really rejuvenates me. But that is really profound, because before I had my faith, that's how I felt. And I went from station 1 to a slower station. I went from tower 1 to tower 15, and it's slower, and you'd only get these incidents every once in a while, but I would get those and be like all excited again, and
Yeah.
like it kind of renewed me, which I think is one of the awesome things about going to conferences and stuff, because those will have that effect on you too.
Oh yeah.
But I do think just having that strong faith will fill those gaps.
Sustain you
Yeah.
in those gaps of,
Yeah.
everybody calls it, the dry spells and the man, we haven't had this in a while, and you're just like, I hope
Yeah.
today's the day, right? So
Yeah, because in between, because we all want to be on the big major incidences, like the big calls or whatever, but in between, I see kingdom work is just as powerful, man. Like being able to, and some people might think I'm a bleeding heart or whatever, but occasionally, it's not every single patient, it's not every single homeless person, but occasionally I feel like God's speaking to me to connect with this person, and that feeds me and fills me
yeah.
as much. And that's where, like, I wish guys would understand that they think I'm wasting my breath, or they think I'm wasting my time, but it makes me feel more fulfilled.
Yeah, so in talking about being downtown, right? Like we have these conversations, and it's easy to hop on the, oh, we're enabling train. We're
Yeah.
we're just perpetuating an issue that's just going to repeat itself. And it was a couple of us that kind of brought out the point of like, well, we're seeing the people that abuse the system, but how many people in these organizations, exist for a reason, and they're there, and um there's a lot of people that go through these programs and come out on the other side of it, and
Yeah.
I'd love to see something where we can maybe get a little bit of some testimonials, right? That maybe the things that they're showing their personnel that motivate them to continue to do what they do. But then allow us to kind of see a little bit of the other side of like, hey, this guy was homeless for a month and then he turned it around, and whoever spoke to him to get through to him or her, and maybe just that little glimpse of like, okay, we know this person or these set of people that we see all the time. They may not change, and they're going to be viewed as such, right? But for us to go and not treat them any differently, have them give them the respect as a person and the love of Jesus for us, right? And maybe they do change, right? We don't know if that's ever going to happen, and
Yeah, exactly. Because And this is a problem across our field, not just like with the homeless, but like our medical calls, which has gotten better with technology because now we can get a report on the backside. But in the past, if you had like a critical patient, you would go out of your way to ask. But no one goes out of their way to ask for like the toe pain or like the chest pain that they think is BS. But sometimes, probably more than we think, that toe pain was a serious infection, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so we just never hear the other side of it. And it's the same with the homeless people. We see them come and go, and we come to recognize the regulars, but there's probably a lot of people in between that you just don't
Ever see.
yeah, you see them once and you never see them again, so you don't realize that that person hit a hard bottom. These services helped them get back on their feet.
Yeah, my dad was homeless for
Oh,
a
wow.
little bit, yeah. And I actually saw him when I was doing my ride-alongs in Melbourne.
Wow.
And we were at this accident scene, and I'm kind of looking around, and then this guy's like in the distance, and he's like, does one of these like, you know, and then I recognize him,
Wow.
and the lieutenant I was with, he's like, oh, know who that is? I was like, I think that's my dad. And he's like, hmm. And we got back to the station, we talked, and he's like, hey man, like, do know that stuff isn't forever, and that stuff's temporary, man. Like, and sure enough, he's on the other side of it now, and it was a long road with that stuff too, and it definitely hit hard though.
Yeah.
So, but
But dude, I mean, I would love to talk to your dad sometime, man.
yeah,
Because that is something more people need to hear, that these things are possible. They need to know that they're possible.
yeah,
Because, man, they don't, and people need to hear how hard it is. Because, like, I mean, I know you've heard it. Oh, just get a job, just do this, just do that. Like, dude, especially the way the economy is right now,
oh
like, you
man,
can't buy a house or you can't rent anything for under $1,500 in Florida a month.
no,
You're not making that at any regular job. Like, it is getting bad,
yeah,
and the homeless population is going to, I think, get a lot worse if we don't start dealing with it. And I want to be clear that I don't think the government is the way to do it. I think we, as believers,
yeah,
need to do it because we
yeah,
see how the government does things.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, and again, not to make any crazy like truth claims of this is how we have to do things, because if there was an answer for it, right,
Yeah.
we would absolutely be, somebody would be, you know, leading the charge to actually fixing stuff.
Yeah. As Jesus said, there will always be homeless,
Yeah.
but we got to do what we can, because if we just help that one person, man,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I can't save the population. And some people were like, whoa, what's the difference? You're not going to make a difference. If I make a difference in one person's life,
Then you made a difference.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because you never know, that person could go on to save 3 people or guide 3 people off the streets or out of drug addiction. And then the next one could go on to be a major motivational speaker. Like, you don't know where that chain is
Yeah.
going to lead.
Yeah.
Somebody that me and you have talked to at some point, that talked to somebody that talked to somebody. And because that chain stayed alive, because we had faith to reach that small percentage,
Plant that seed.
yeah, they could go on to, that's the hope that I maintain.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's no use in living in, like, not having faith, like being atheist and agnostic, and like, dude, even if you're right and there's not a God, which I know you're not right, because we've had that encounter and that experience. But like, even if we were wrong and we're just is hallucination or whatever you want to say, like, your way of not having faith is gonna leads to no hope, which leads to no purpose, which leads to more drug addiction, which leads to, like, it's a downward slippery slope of why are we even here?
Yeah.
It
It makes the fire service pointless.
yeah, it makes the
What are
fires.
we-
Yeah,
What are we,
yeah,
sustaining things for? What are we protecting things for? What are we saving lives for?
yeah.
It gets real dark real quick.
It does. It does.
So yeah, all great stuff, right? And then to talk about like your burnout, right? We just hit it real hard right there. Those things can weigh on you, and to continue your point, you carry the weight of that tough call or that person that's cussing you out for the 3rd time today, and you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I, you just, you can spiral. And then that's just at work, not even talking about at home. If your home life's bad and then you come in and then you have a 20 call day, you're not really resting. Things are gonna get to be overwhelming, and then that's what we see. And a big part of, God willing, what comes out of the platform that I'll develop is just a community of believers who can encourage each other, like you were saying before, and get each other through these tough times that we will experience. Because there's a lot of hope. There's hope in Jesus.
Amen.
And just to get down to the end, not that we have to end our conversation, but just our notes here is, I believe our purpose as firefighters is to glorify God in all we do, just like what you said. By loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Glorifying God in how we train physically and we prepare mentally for the incidents that we respond to. And love our neighbors as ourselves, the people we respond to, and the members that we work alongside of. The Google definition that I was just doing in my research is, the Bible generally states that our purpose in life is to love God, love others, and to glorify God in all that we do. We are called to be transformed into the image of Christ, live a life of service and discipleship, and share the good news of the gospel with others. In fire service, we have a unique opportunity to glorify God every day that we come into work, inside the station and outside the station.
That's really important, but it's also tough, man.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's getting easier for me, maybe because I've lived so long without any kind of faith or living for anything other than myself. But there's still days where, like, I talk about it all the time on this podcast, when you put yourself out there as a man of faith, you are now someone's vision of a Christian.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not everyone understands that Christians aren't perfect.
No.
Actually,
No.
I don't even like calling myself Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That term is very, yeah.
It started as a derogatory term, I think, from what I understand. It was how people would call, the pagans were trying to identify the different group of Jews.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
Yeah. So they would just call themselves the follower of Christ. So I'm trying to like use that more. And I know it sounds like one of those things like you're just changing the term or whatever, but there really is a difference between someone who's a religious Christian or a Christian in name and someone who's actually following Christ. Because that's something I've been struggling to define, like my entire walk. Like, that I was a Christian, but now I'm a follower of Christ. Now I'm a believer,
Yeah. You can slip very fast into the category of people that say, oh, you're a Christian. Yeah. And the Christians that, oh, you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing this. And super judgmental, super critical all the time. Not biblical and not what Jesus wants us to do.
Yeah. And Christians are definitely held to a higher standard than other people. I know there's probably some reasons for that. There's, a lot of history involved, but sometimes when it comes like, just going off some of the stuff I see online, and they'll be like, oh, they'll be tying Christian values to the Republican Party and the things that they're doing. And, politics is always something I want to stay away from because, one, I'm not well versed in it. My focus is on what's in the Bible. But from what I can tell from politics, none of these parties follow Christian values. No one on either side.
No.
And some of them talk about it, but they don't do it.
Yeah.
Other ones, claim to be doing things in the name, like, again, it's frustrating for me as a follower of Christ, trying to defend Jesus, trying to defend his word, when you see people mingling the two. That's all the enemy's work, really. But it makes our job a lot more difficult when you have Christians doing and saying things like, I can't what are you doing? I can't defend that.
Yeah.
You're killing me here.
Yeah. The lines are not blurred, but people start blurring them when they try to fit their own narratives into things. Just personally with different political parties and trying to make things seem like they're a lot more inviting or a lot more biblically accurate when they're not biblically aligning. So
yeah, I don't think it's again. I just try to stay out of politics.
Yeah,
not saying you should, whatever. That's your own thing. I'm not here to talk about that. But it's like I said, I don't think either one aligns with with Christian values, and then whether they say they are or not, and then what they do is totally different story, which is what's tough.
Yeah, and so just some scripture to tie in what we were saying just a little bit ago is Leviticus 19:18. Do not take vengeance on your neighbor or bear any grudge against them, but love your neighbor as yourself. Then we see Mark chapter 12, 30 and 31, and then Matthew 22, 37 to 39. The first and the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. The second command is this: love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, and I love the story that where Jesus explains what a neighbor is. Actually, let me pull that up. I just read that.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about like, how we're supposed to treat people, and we've talked a lot about like the homeless people, or just in general the people that we run on sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think we forget too that what may be really obvious to us, like we're problem solvers as firefighters and paramedics. Like we have to know how to untangle everything. We got to know a little bit about water systems. We got to know a little bit about electrical systems. We have to know stuff about structures, about machinery, cars, etc. A lot of the population doesn't have that same skill set.
Yeah.
And that's why we're there. It's got to be around Matthew where he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah, I think it's like right after that. 22. And I'm going to go into Matthew 25 after that.
Yeah.
It's the story of the Samaritan.
Oh.
Yeah, Luke 10. Yeah, that's right. I was reading Luke 10 last night. So Luke 10, 29 through 37. So yeah, you were talking about where Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. He told him, you've answered correctly, and do this. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? So it's like, who exactly are we supposed to be treating?
Yeah.
Good. Like, because
I definitely a valid question.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, we think of our neighbors, or you can think of them as your literal neighbor, or as your friend, or as people that are like me. And this is a big problem, I think, with our world in general. It's not just an American problem. It's not just a cultural problem here. I mean, there are a lot of places in the world where when you don't look like someone, mm-hmm. you just naturally, you don't get along, or you question whether you can trust them or not, or whatever, and they don't treat you as your neighbor. Yeah. So Jesus goes on to clarify this question in Luke chapter 10:30. So Jesus took up the question and said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him, beat him up, and fled, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And in the same way, a Levite, when he arrived at the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan on his journey came up to him. And when he saw the man, he had compassion. He went over to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on olive oil and wine. And then he put him on his own animal, brought him to the inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and then gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I'll reimburse you for whatever extra you spend. So to clarify and put this in modern terms, there's a guy who gets robbed, and he's going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he gets stripped. They beat him up, and they fled, leaving him injured to die. And a priest, mm-hmm. A priest happens to go down the road, and when he saw him, he passed him by. And in the same way, a Levite, which would be another Jew, so in modern terms, that could be just like another Christian, or it could be, somebody that's like you, mm-hmm. and they arrive, they saw him, and then they just pass him by because it's not my problem. Right. But then you have a Samaritan, and in this context, in this frame, like the Samaritan is a non-Jew. They're Gentiles. So this is someone who's not like you at all. Mm-hmm. This is not like what we just explained earlier, what a neighbor would be like. This is someone who went out of their way, doesn't know you, doesn't know, different values, different upbringing, whatever. And this person stops. And this person stops and helps him, not only helps him, gives him an animal to ride on, takes them to the inn, pays for their food, pays for their medical bills, their upkeep in the inn, and says, I'll come back and take care of whatever they need. You know, like that's what a good neighbor is. That's what a good neighbor is. And that neighbor never asked, hey, how did you get yourself into this situation?
Yeah.
You know, like were you walking somewhere you shouldn't have been?
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about any of that.
Did you call 911?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you call 911? Yeah. And that's what really like stood out to me. And I'm going to go back to Matthew 25 when I was reading this not too long ago, man. And kind of circling back to burnout before we close this thing out. Like I was getting to a place of burnout because you feel like as a response, I felt like, and this is probably, again, goes back to wanting to be in control of everything, but like, and I know I'm not the only one that thinks this way. When people call 911 for whatever reason, you know, surprise, surprise for some of those listeners, not all of them are what we would consider true emergencies. Some of them are because people fail to take care of themselves.
Yes.
Some of them are because they fail to get regular health care for things they know they should. Some of them are something that's been bothering them all week long, and then they decide at 3 o'clock in the morning on a middle of our busiest night that now is the time they want to go to the hospital because they can't sleep.
For no reason. Yeah.
And it still blows me away that they don't understand why that's frustrating for us.
No, yeah, it's crazy.
But that's the truth is they don't understand. And it's not our job to ask them how they got in those positions. Cause we had talked a little bit about like free will and predestination, and something I really want to develop to be able to talk more. But like, if you keep peeling back the layer, these people that are homeless, these people that have these issues, what I learned through my walk when I sat in these rooms in a rehab facility and I heard the stories firsthand. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It makes me emotional, and I'm not even going to share because we've been here talking for a while.
Yeah.
But man, some of the stories that these people went through, you're like, no wonder you're in the situation you are.
Yeah.
At some point I will share more of this stuff, but you're like, dude, I am so blessed to have what I have.
Oh.
And that's not, you know, again, people go so quick to the other side and be like, well, that doesn't make it okay. And it's, you know, now you're enabling. And it's like, no, all it means is we need to have a little more compassion.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not that hard. Just to be a little nicer to these people, because you don't know what they've been through, man. And you don't know that, honestly, some of these situations I heard, most people I know would have crumbled. So building on that point, I was reading this. The Son of Man comes in. Yeah. So Jesus is talking. He says, I'm going to go back to 31. Jesus is talking. He says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all his angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left, and then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes or clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And this verse hit me like a ton of bricks, man. Mm-hmm. It's like, I felt like I've always had a good bedside manner. Like I don't want to paint the picture that like there's a point where this really clicks. When you get to a place of like burnout, you can start to feel like you have an obligation to steward that rescue, to use Christian terminology, because it is hard for us to think about when I take this person who did not take care of themselves and it led to what might be an emergency to them. And now I take this ambulance out of service to transport them to a hospital for something that's not truly an emergency. Now the GSW, gunshot wound, comes out in our area. Now a fire comes out in our area, heart attack. Now a rescue has to come from another part of the city to fill in, and that delays their response. So we feel, some of us that have been in these positions feel an obligation. And for me, this was truly my motivation. It's not just because like I want to get out of calls, or I don't want to transport. Like it burned me, especially as I started to walk more as a Christian, is like, I want to do this and give the shirt off my back for these people. But I also feel like this needs to be protected for those who need it. And
that's real. That's a real thing. That's not like, that's where you draw that line of bleeding hearts versus people that, are trying to just be realistic, because that very real thing happens, and
yeah.
we can't be so eager to help people in the way that we want to help them in the area that we only can help them in. Well, let me rephrase that. We can't be so eager to help somebody in a field where we're supposed to help certain people. The homeless organizations and people that can take people to the hospital, get them checked out, and then come back and get them further care and take care of them, right? That is what they're there for.
Yeah.
The very real part of what an ambulance is there for is to, have these emergent incidents happen, and we treat them and transport them, right? And if that isn't what's necessary, we shouldn't just help somebody to help them if we can try to do the best that we can and be the most efficient as we can while we're doing it. And it's not right for us to sit out on a street corner trying to give somebody, this life talk of how to, bounce back and recover all the time, because then we would be spending a lot more time, taking up resources that should be somewhere else, right? And there's a balance to it,
Exactly. That's a really good point. Because like I said, sometimes I do feel called to have that conversation with someone.
And definitely appropriate sometimes, right?
Yeah. But it's tough because you want, like, even if you want to help everyone and you want to save everyone, we have to remember, and this is part of that control thing of going, like, we got to let go and let God and trust that we're not the only person that's going to interact with this guy. We do what we can while we're here. And then we leave it in God's hands. And then at the same time, that's also part of that control issue, is wanting to steward the rescue, because there's like those boundaries that you're given, called protocols and rules and regs. And sometimes we think what we're doing is right and trying to stretch outside of what those boundaries are. And that's where you're going to get into conflict. And one of those things is like, that's tough is, and again, this podcast is not meant to give you advice on how you handle patients or whatever. Follow your protocols. But our protocols say if somebody requests to go to the hospital, you have to take them.
Yes.
So if we're trying to convince somebody that really wants to go, but we're trying to convince them that they don't need to go, it's like you're fighting outside of that bounds. Like, you might be able to convince them, but that's where a lot of that struggle comes in. And it's like, trust God, trust that he's going to take care of it. And so this is where I had like a breakthrough moment. And I was this is after I got promoted, I was on Rescue 2 and we were getting hammered. And I shared this story with you, and me and my partner, we were getting hammered. Our patience was very thin, and just getting down to rest. And it's one of those nights, and this is at a time where I'm seeking God, and I hadn't fully surrendered, but I'm seeking, and I hit the bunk, and I prayed, and I'm like, I prayed about this exact thing. I'm like, God, this is getting really hard for me to work here in this area. I love it because I get to reach people, I get to talk to people, but at the same time, it's like you feel like you're being abused. Mm-hmm. You feel like the system is being taken advantage of. And again, I don't think most people realize that there's a limited number of those ambulances. They don't just like repopulate like a video game. There's 11 of them for the entire city of Orlando. Yeah. There's 11 and five or six part-time PMO units for 500,000 people. Yeah. That's not a lot. No. So this weight was bearing down on me, and I hit my knees and I'm praying about it. I'm, God, I don't know what to do. And it's just something came over me. It was probably one of the first times I recognized how the Lord speaks to us, and it wasn't an audible voice, but it was just this really clear, profound thought that was like, If it's going to fail, let it fail. And I know that sounds bad,
Yeah.
but the idea was that, like, it's not on you.
Yeah.
Stop trying to control things that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And the very next call, finish that prayer, hop in bed, get a call right away. And the very next call is a regular that we have, and he's a homeless gentleman. And usually when this guy calls, he's legitimate medical issues. He has CHF, so his face will be like swolled up.
Ooh.
And he's always laying down. We always tell him, like, I won't say his real
Sit
name,
up.
but hey, Charlie, you can't sleep on your back.
Yeah.
You know, like, you have CHF. But usually by that time we got to take him. So it's a legitimate call. And we get there, and this night it was not. I almost didn't recognize him because his face was like thin. And I'm like, is that you? And sure enough, it was him, but he was just drunk. It was really obvious. He was just drunk. He had bottles laying around him, stuff laying around. I want to go to the hospital. I want to, take me somewhere that's got a TV. And
They
I'm
all
like,
sound the same.
Yeah, right. Take me somewhere that's got a TV. I'm like, dude, I'm not
do that.
I'm not taking you to the hospital. I'm like, look, when you call, we have no problem helping you. And I start going down this road. I'm like, I'm not taking you to the hospital because you're drunk, or whatever. Yeah. And then I'm like, and my partner, he's coming up ready to lay into him. And I just see it just catches the corner of my eye. There's a Bible over his shoulder. And it just like stood out to me, man. And I'm just like, stop. I hear you. And I just like, and something changed for me big time, like after that, because I stopped trying so hard. It was like expending so much energy on these types of things, like stressing about it, losing sleep over it, literally, and I took him to the hospital, man, and we had a great conversation. And, he thanked me by the time we got out of the hospital. I was like, hey, thanks, man. And because, again, it wasn't like a real medical call, I did my due diligence and checked his blood pressure over, but I just sat and chatted with him about the Bible. Say, hey, you got that Bible there? And, I've been trying to read this thing more often. And it was a really good interaction. And I'd love to say that, hey, he turned his life around. He's not on the streets anymore. I don't know. Chances are he's probably still
not.
I don't work in that area anymore. But, I know that it fulfilled me to stop trying to control everything. And sometimes there are these little interactions, like we all want to hear big miracles, but sometimes we get these lessons that really help us out in the long run. And there's subtle little nudges from God.
Yeah. We have kind of a different system, obviously, right? So we have system status ambulances that will cover our areas, and sometimes we wait longer than others. But when you're saying steward the ambulance, that's huge, because we will have different crews come up, and we know how more or less it's going to go.
Yeah.
By, who's coming. And we have a crew that we love running with because they take things seriously, and they're kind of the minority of the crews that come up. And we have a very heavy homeless population. So the inner city agency that covers this area, they pretty much have that burnout every shift, and they come up, and it may not be going off on them, but it'll be all right, let's go, and I feel that when you're faith-based, or you want to really take care of people, you have something to base that off of, and it's not you expending the energy that you feel that you're giving to people and then just giving it away. You're receiving love and a purpose, and then you're distributing that to people, and that is given to everybody all the time, and that's just who you are. And even for the tough people, right, maybe you hold your tongue a little bit more, or don't react on the different things that they may do or say, right? And then you just treat them like you would when you're loving your neighbor, right? Yeah. But we have control of that as the people that are in charge, and what's big over there is like kind of what the medic does, kind of steers the interaction with the patient, because the medic can come up and say, hey, how you doing? Okay, it looks like you just, scraped your knee or whatever, something insignificant. But they're treating them well, and the EMT will come up, hey, you're not wearing your necklace that you usually wear, and whatever. Like, it's real lighthearted, right? There's a big difference between coming up and start, you firing off on these people, and then coming up and taking care of them, And who knows how long that goes and how far that stretches, like we've been hitting on, but it's not healthy for you to carry that negative energy, and then you just start distributing the opposite, right?
Yeah.
In this thing that you feel like you run out of the goodwill to be nice, and then things just go south.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know how far it goes when we put the effort in, but we know how far it goes when we don't.
Yeah.
And if more people do that just a little bit, and maybe not everyone has a crazy comeback story, but if it made the world a slightly better place, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to where Jesus is explaining how we clothed and fed him, think about this. He's talking about, like, we're talking about all this stuff that we're professionals. We get paid to do this. We get paid to help these people. And some of us still, or in sometimes we still don't want to do it. Like, that hit me hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, we're paid to help people. Like, how much are you going to do this when you're not paid? Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
that's huge. Probably
like
not a whole lot.
Yeah.
If you're not wanting to, you don't have the heart for that. And, to go off of that too, these people aren't worth losing your job over.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth you carrying this negative energy to the point where the fifth patient that you run that's like that day gets you ready to swing on them, literally, and it's not worth losing your livelihood, losing your reputation, losing all those things, and you boil over in frustration, or you have bad habits when you get off duty because you're carrying all this weight when you really don't have to.
Right.
And there's a purpose, and there's a hope, right? So
yeah, that's a really good point, that it's not like all these little interactions matter if they're slowly draining you to a point where you snap. To a point where you can no longer do the job, or like you said, you snap on a patient. You do something, you say something that gets you into trouble.
Next thing you know, you're on West 2.
Yeah, it's not unheard of, man.
Throwing a kick.
Yeah, it's not unheard of, man. All these little things add up.
Yeah. Big closing point I wanted to throw in there was we ought to be doing these things consistently, and despite what we feel going into our shifts. But we don't always have our faith on solid ground. The solid ground is Jesus. And when we have Jesus, we are called to a specific purpose, and that's to emphasize efficiency, reduce complacency, and take care of each other. And when we do those things, we're the best for the people around us that we work with. We're the best for the patients. We're the best for our families. And yeah, we're able to have long and healthy careers that do a lot of great things.
This has been great, dude. I'm really glad we connected, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a blessing, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So I will definitely be looking for more. I'll definitely be keeping my eyes out for what Matt Wilson has in the future, man. And, I recommend you guys all do too. And, yeah, that'd be awesome, man. Keep having these kinds of conversations, build up what you're working on. And like I said, however I can help, that goes for other people too. I'll do what I can to give advice. I'm not an expert on doing any of this stuff. I'm figuring it out as I go, but that's what it's about, man.
Yeah. I just want to encourage you real quick too, man. Like, you're being faithful. You have had a rocky road, of course, but I think the reason why the Lord's putting your face out there is so you can be that redemption story, that there are people that are struggling as we speak, that are listening, that are on the fence, that are contemplating these things, and they don't know where to turn right now. They don't know how it's going to change. They may not be to the point of giving up, but there may be people that are on that, on that path of, hey, I don't know how it's going to look in a couple days. And I'm praying not only for you, but you continue to grow and be the light that you are, because had you not done any of this, right, we wouldn't even be sitting here,
right?
And that's a huge blessing for me, and a huge blessing for the people that we don't know will ever listen to this or hear about this. But I want to tell you thank you, from person obviously you just met a couple days ago, but I really appreciate you, man, and I'm excited to see what God's going to do with it. So
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man.
It means a lot to me. Let me close us out with prayer then.
Yeah, man.
Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for this interaction. I thank you for all my brothers in Christ. I thank you for all the new connections that are being made. And I pray that this podcast was guided by the Holy Spirit. And I pray the Spirit continues to guide it to get to the ears it needs to get to, Lord. And I just pray for whoever's listening that just is on the edge of doing something that you're calling them to do. I pray that it gives them the courage to step out, to meet somebody, talk to somebody, and maybe start that thing that they've been thinking about. Or if you've been thinking about committing yourself to Christ, if you've been toes in, toes out like I was, I just pray that this episode or my story and what Matt shared just gives somebody the encouragement to trust God, to put your faith in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. Profess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and he can do amazing things in your life if you let him. So, in your name, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen.